And welcome back to another week of Bearded Sports. I was doing an intro before, so I'll say that. Hello, sports fans and fans of sport. This is Sean. Hugh, how are we doing this week?
I'm doing great. Thank you, mate. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited this week. So for everybody tuning in, we have Usman Mozvidal. We're going to be talking about some of the other fights in UFC 261. We're going to be touching on the European Super League that was floated this week, for lack of a better term. So please stick around, like and subscribe, comment, and we look forward to chatting with you. And here is the intro. All right, you may have noticed Hugh's. That's very good, Hugh. Hugh's got to prompt me when that thing finishes playing. For some reason, I'm not seeing it. So, Hugh, how is everything going this week?
Yeah, tremendous, mate. I'm, in personal life side of it, things are going great. Just come back from a workout today as well, so just particularly feeling in a really good spot right now. But coming off the back of the UFC fights last night, I always love the day after a main UFC card. So yeah, I'm in a really great spot, mate. How are you doing?
Golf is back on. And everything is. If you ever watch the film Matrix, it's like, when he eats that cookie and the Oracle says everything will be right as rain, and that's kind of how I felt with golf being back on. It's my mental, I guess it's my yoga, it's my meditation, it's sort of my scent. Yeah, so it's quite good. Actually, I wanted to mention something to you because I've made a big dietary change and I've lost 5 pounds this week. I haven't shared this with you.
No, you've not. Awesome. What up, mate?
I am not eating any food until 5 o'clock every day. I am just not eating until dinner.
5 p.m.
5 p.m. Just no food, 5 p.m. And then because I'm weakest in the evening. That's when I'm at my worst. Okay. So if I slip up at 8:30 and have something, it's fine. I'm still well within my calorie allocation. And I'm finding it's not that hard to not eat during the day. I'm hungry, but if I sit there and think about it in isolation, I'm no more hungry than I would be at breakfast, really.
I think touching on the intermittent fasting stuff that we've done before and I've tried personally, it's something you get used to. It's surprising how quickly your body does adapt to it. It is horrible the first time, and the second time is a little easier. Then when you've done it a few times, you actually don't even think about it.
Well, if I sit there and thought, it was difficult, but when I would sit there and actually think about how I feel, how do you feel? I'm hungry. I'm not like dizzy, or I'm not, I'm just hungry. And for me, it's, Facebook, who cares about Facebook? Facebook just logged off. If you were to say, if I went and had like an early lunch and then, let's say dinner at 7 and I was hungry before dinner, I'd say all day I didn't feel any more hungry than that, which isn't like, I'm going to, if I don't eat, I'm going to die. I was fine. So it's going really well. I'll keep you posted on that, though. It seems like easy weight loss right now.
Good for you, mate. Just very briefly on that point as well. He's cranked me up at the moment, the coach with the bodybuilding stuff. So I'm like, he's ripped out almost all carbs outside of around training when we do that before and after. And I am feeling it. And within 3 days, I've lost kilos. So it's like 2 pound loss in 3 days. Yeah. I was like, dragging my ass. But actually today, because I've had a few carbs around working out, I feel much better. So both moving in the right direction there, Sean.
We'll keep everybody posted. But I think this week we want to be talking about the big story, which I was saying earlier, I couldn't be happier that you got me into UFC, and I am properly into it. And to everybody watching, I was just saying it, and it's been a theme that I've maybe brought back to the channel a few times. Is what's really gotten me into UFC are the characters, the people, the fighters are so much more interesting than boxers. And I was saying to you before we went live, I'm a big fan of Anthony Joshua. I still am a big fan of Anthony Joshua, but he's kind of boring in comparison to and no disrespect to Anthony Joshua. I kind of like that he's boring in boxing, given some of the characters. But you do have these bullshit characters in UFC, but they're so much more intelligent and interesting. I mean, if you look at a Masvidal versus, let's say, a Deontay Wilder, it's not even close who's more interesting and who's better to watch. Masvidal, without a doubt.
I would agree with you. I'm also a massive fan of Anthony Joshua, watching his documentary and how humble he is and the way he treats people. He's just such a lovely bloke. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd say he's the most electrifying must watch type of personality, but he's just a lovely bloke basically. And I'd say that he probably stands out for me as one of the like I just want him to do well because of how nice he is.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of UFC fighters that are very, very intelligent and articulate, calculated what they're saying. So I also can see a difference between them.
So with that in mind, so UFC 261, I think we need to start with the headline, which is Usman and Mozvidal. And I got to say, I was watching a lot of the build-up because we made our picks, and my perfect record was on the line. And if I hadn't mentioned that before, for anybody who doesn't know, every UFC fight I've ever picked, or any fight I've picked, I've been correct, unlike Hugh. But that's okay. So I was actually getting a bit nervous about my pick watching the build-up, with Masvidal and Usman. I was starting to double, I guess, second guess myself. But in the end, I didn't message you. I stuck the course. I was Usman, and it was pretty obvious after the fight why Usman was the favorite.
Yeah, I watched it this morning. I went with you on that, mainly just to follow your lucky streak, rather than me knowing what I'm talking about.
Lucky streak? What the fuck? Not a lucky streak.
Yeah, we watched the first fight, and I didn't realize it was such short notice. Was it 11 days?
I thought it was less than that.
Was it 6 days? 6 days notice. Yeah. It was. So Masvidal, that was a ridiculous time frame. In a week's time, you got to strip your weight and get ready for a fight with someone. But Usman brought a great point in the countdown that, look, he had to adjust his. It's not like he said, I also had 6 days to prepare. Yes, I was preparing for something different. Now I've got to prepare for something else. So, I mean, it was like, okay, valid point. And then hearing Usman talk, I don't know if you saw it, but he was just like this desire in his face in the build-up interviews. Like, he's like, oh, if he wants a full training camp, now I've got a full training camp. I'm gonna I'm ripping him apart. And the venom and the kind of the belief that he had in himself. Yeah. I just thought he's gonna take some beating. I must admit, I thought that when it was standing up in the first round, there wasn't as much wrestling. And Masvidal is so slick on his feet. I don't know if you kind of picked that up, but he's so smooth and silky with leg kicks, like bang, whipping it and punching combos. And I was like, okay, this might be a little bit closer because it's not really wrestling right now. But I think credit to Usman that the moving over to Trevor Whitman, who's a boxing coach, is really paying off. And he's to finish Masvidal in that fashion was just unbelievable.
Well, I had a thought about this because I had the same thought in the first round, where I thought there was not a lot in this. I thought Masvidal, he could turn the tides as the fight continues. And it reminded me of the first fight when he only had 6 days notice. And it's not something I hear a lot of. He got comfortably beaten by Usman, but I didn't think it was that comfortable. There was a lot of points in that fight that he took on short notice where I thought, man, if he had a full camp, if he was able to fully prepare for this, I mean, if he's not that far off now, because I mean, my view is he looked more of a challenger than anybody else that Usman's faced in the previous fights. But the way the fight finished, it reminded me that Usman, I think, is so good at what he does. It looks like it doesn't look like it's hard or he's trying. I think it's so efficient the way he moves, and it's so textbook, and it looks so easy to him. You almost forget, like, some of those punches that he's throwing and they're landing, they're having a big impact. And even that last punch that ended the fight, it seemed like it came out of nowhere. But when I rewatched the fight, he was picking his spots, and he was definitely landing throughout the fight.
Yeah, I think a lot of credit should go to Trevor Whitman, but actually it's probably a bit harsh on Henry Hoof, who was the kickboxing coach down in Florida that he worked with. So he's worked with 2 high-class striking coaches now. And Trevor Whitman in particular, if you look at the people that he's worked with, Rose Namajunas and Justin Gaethje, he's made 2 world champions of them, and now he's got a 3rd. Anyone that works with him just kind of praises how good he is with his striking coaching. I think what I would say is I would counter very slightly that at the end of the first, Usman looked a little sloppy, like he was throwing some haymakers and getting a little bit wild there. Yeah, and that's when I started to think, actually, he may be in trouble here. If he's swinging for the fences like that, Masvidal's going to start picking him off. So that was when I started thinking, okay, this might be close. But he has so much power behind them. He tightened it up for the second round. And I mean, it's the only second time he's been knocked out like that, and he knocked him out. Like, it was emphatic the way he beat him. So full respect. And I don't know about you, Sean, but watching the build up and interviews, I know you're getting used to the characters and who they are, but I absolutely love Masvidal as well.
Oh God,
and it's just pure class the way he stood at the end. He got knocked out for the second time. His friends and family are all watching this. It's his home crowd, and he stood around for the interview, because a lot of people walk out in a huff.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've just been like embarrassed. And, you know, the way he conducted himself, full respect to Usman. That he took nothing away from him. He beat me on the night. He deserved it. And, you know, I just love to Miami. He really, I felt he did himself justice as well. I'm not sure what's next for Masvidal, but Dana White has already given some hints of what might be next for Usman.
How old is Masvidal anyway?
Great question. 30s. Let's have a look.
Because it's going to be hard for him to get another.
33. Let's have a look. No, 36. So he's no spring chicken. That's the thing, mate. He's been fighting for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's going to be this was, and I've heard it banded around. This was his chance, really, you know, a title shot. Is it losing this? It's going to be difficult for him to put himself in that position. And I would imagine that these fights, you know, this lifestyle isn't something that's easy for someone who's, you know, in their advanced 30s, you know, to make another push. Is it possible for someone like a Masvidal to make a push for a title again, or is he just fighting for the sake of fighting now?
It's always possible in this sport. The problem is, I believe that Usman's got his number. Actually, Usman's probably got almost everyone's number.
Yeah.
I think the person to beat Usman is going to be either technical grappler on the ground, so submission artist to counter his wrestling, or they've got to be phenomenals on their feet. So Jorge, actually, you know, I'm saying that people have said that he's maybe the best boxer on his feet in the UFC. I'm just reading here, Sean. He's been professionally fighting since 2003, Masvidal, and before that, he was on the streets and getting filmed on YouTube with Kimbo Slice. So this guy knows what he's doing. But yeah, the thing is, Masvidal can still take care of a lot of people. All it takes is Usman to be beaten by someone potentially, and then Masvidal has an in for the next person.
Yeah.
So he's going to have it really difficult now. Losing twice to Usman, he's going to have to knock at least 2 people out emphatically, or 3 people to have a chance. I think so. Let's talk about what's next. Usman, it was really clear what was going to happen. Dana said the fight is going to be Colby Covington.
Yeah. So
Kobe was at the event. He was talking a lot of shit. And he said that's the fight to make. And Dana doesn't always put out on the night what he's going to do, but he was quite forthright in that happening. Now, Colby and Masvidal used to be training partners. They were close mates. They were roommates. And then there's some bad beef. That is if, and I would say probably when Usman beats Colby, that's where my money's going to lie. I think a fight between Masvidal and Colby is going to be massive because of the hate behind it, the bad blood. Everyone hates Colby. Everyone loves Masvidal. The build-up is going to be immense. So I think Masvidal might sit on the fence, wait to see what happens on that front. And that's going to be a big paycheck for him. But he's going to need to beat Colby, maybe one other person before being considered again. But I'm not sure who I can see going through Usman, to be honest with you, mate.
I don't know. And that's, you raise a good point, actually, about the end of the first round on that, because that was the only time I think Usman looked a bit sort of flaily, so to speak. And I think some of that came down to a few shots that Masvidal landed towards the end. I think he hit him before that point. And I think Usman was a bit stunned just before then. But when I look back over his fights, he's so efficient and clean with how he works. If I were to compare him to, let's say, we watch Oliveira, we watched Ngannou, even Jan. I mean, there's a specific manner about them, and there's the way Usman works. It's so clean, it's so tidy, and even like the knockout punch, it just happens so quick and without effort. He when he goes through these fights and he wins, it doesn't seem like there's much effort. And I think DC was saying that Colby Covington being the obvious choice because he's somebody who has the cardio, he's got the physicality to potentially challenge Usman. He's given Usman a decent enough fight.
He did give him a good fight, actually. And to be fair, he broke his jaw. Was it round 2? And he had his mouth open, and he caught. And you see the punch. It caught and just broke his jaw. And he mentioned that in the corner a couple of times. Now, me, I would have I would have just gone to the hospital immediately. Like, you know, he still went on and fought a couple of rounds.
Yeah.
But I think the way he was talking about it, he's like, my jaw's broke. And the guy and his coach was trying to talk him through to kind of get him off the topic, you know. But I think it really did impact it, as you would imagine. Colby's going to, I mean, he's going to take some stopping no matter what. I'm just looking through the top contender list now, Sean. Michael Kiesa, I would love to see. He's ranked number 6. Michael Kiesa is a grappler, very strong dude. You'll see, like, you know, he's probably not as ripped as Usman, because Usman is in like a different league, but he's not a million miles away. And Kiesa's got the jiu-jitsu to go with it. So that would be interesting. I still would put money on Usman, but that would be interesting. The other one I would suggest is perhaps Leon Edwards, who's the Brit from Birmingham. He's against Nate Diaz next month. No, in a couple of weeks, actually, in 2 weeks' time. And if he pieces up Nate Diaz to see us, because he's a kickboxer, so Kamaru again, you know, he could. We've not seen him against a top contender, Leon, so that will be really interesting. So,
why isn't Nate Diaz ranked? And this is a stupid, I'm new to UFC question. I appreciate that.
Why isn't he, mate? So to start with, don't hold too much weight to the rankings.
Okay.
They will fluctuate up and down. I think he may be. Let's have a look in lightweight. He's not ranked in welterweight. I'm just looking at lightweight because he's fought in a couple of weight classes. So and it's been a while since he's fought. So no, he's not. Doesn't look like he's in the lightweight top lot either. But that's the thing. Like, that's what I like about UFC. Everyone loves Nate Diaz. He sells tickets. I'm telling you, that is going to be a great fight. Leon Edwards, and they're going to bang it out. Like, you're going to see a stand-up war from two tough guys. Leon's a lot more technical. Nate Diaz is like a robot. So, and he's going to have all this. I don't know. It's going to be a great fight. But no, I can't answer your question, to be honest with you, mate.
So do you think now, and this was a question I heard, again, I wanted to get your take on it. And I haven't had the pleasure of properly watching Jon Jones through a cycle, given I've only been watching UFC now for the better part of 6 months. And there's a lot of people saying, you know, really we need to look at Usman as the top ranked pound for pound fighter in the UFC right now, specifically after the last performance. And given that Jon Jones hasn't fought in quite a while and is now in a heavyweight division where he's unproven.
I don't. I think it's recency bias. I think you just watch him. You know, Usman has been fantastic in the last 3 fights. He dominated Tyron Woodley. He absolutely ripped him apart for 5 rounds. Then Gilbert Burns. Was it Gilbert Burns, the order? Conor Usman. So it's 4 fights. He's looked phenomenal. So he's got Tyron Woodley, where he took the belt, beaten for 5 rounds. Colby Covington finished him. Colby is a tough dude, like him or hate him. Jorge Masvidal, he went to the decision with, and then he dominated Gilbert Burns. So his last 4 fights, he's been massively impressive. Pound for pound, I think there are better all-round competitors than him that have a higher skill set on their feet and a higher skill set in grappling that are more broad-based. What he does with his boxing and his wrestling have been extremely impressive, but I think there are more well-rounded fighters, and Jon Jones would have my vote 100% because of what he's done and for how long. Jon Jones has won. He's in the teens of fights, and the people he's beaten, not 4 fights. Usman, if he carries on, is going to be in the running. I think it's just a little bit of excitement and recency bias to be, I think, I'm unfair on people like Jon Jones to call that.
Yeah. And I think Adesanya too would have depending on especially how it goes in his next fights, I think he would be considered a little bit more well-rounded than Usman. Well-rounded. I don't know. Maybe like far superior on his feet, but how well-rounded is he on the ground? He's not much of a grappler though, is he? No.
Again, I would say no, maybe. But on his feet, I mean, is he? I think probably is number 1. But it's a really tough one. The thing is with Jon Jones, he came in as a wrestler, and his kickboxing is about as good as anyone's. He knocks out kickboxers, and he out wrestles Olympic wrestlers in DC. He's choked out submission guy. Like, he's done everything. So it's like he does not have a weak, and he's an animal. Like he doesn't have a weakness. So Usman, what's his weakness? Well, I would really like to see him against, unfortunately, I suppose it's a Gilbert Burns on the ground. Gilbert Burns has got the skill level, but that was a stand-up fight in the end. So that's maybe he could get caught with someone that really knows what they're doing with submissions. Maybe, you know, we're yet to see it.
And then we had we had some other fights on the card as well. And we had it was, let's see if I can remember the names now. Could you help me out with it? It was
of course it could. Yeah, it was Rose Namajunas versus Weili Zhang.
Listen, Weidl.
You what? Sorry,
I knew I was going to forget these names. I had it on. I actually had the names on my screen and I lost them. I'm
Weili Zhang. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's the champ of the women's strawweight division, and yes. Rose Namajunas.
Namajunas, yes, that one I do.
Rose.
It is Namajunas. Which that was I have yet to, because I'm again a short period of time, the ladies fights that I've seen, or the women's fights, ladies I think isn't the right term to use, the women's fights all end quite quickly. Usually you so far I haven't seen a close fight. Everything's been fairly dominated by one performer or the other, and this was no exception. It was just wow, it was an incredible knockout. It was from Rose.
And Zhang is an absolute beast, mate. You were saying a lot of the women's do go the distance because, again, this isn't the heavier handed people are, the heavier they are, they're more likely are to get knocked out because of the power they can attribute. So there are more knockouts in the heavyweight division than there are in the flyweight division of men's, and it's the same for women. The heavier women tend to finish earlier or more often than the lighter women, but not necessarily the case with some of the people that we're talking about. I don't know if you've seen it, but Zhang versus oh god, what's her name now? It's Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the Polish lady.
Well
Did you watch that? Joanna,
no.
Mate, that was fight of the year. That was 5 rounds of these women that are light. So this is the good thing about light fighters, men, women, is that they are like Duracell bunnies. They do not stop. They are just it's like the action is just it's just from start to finish. Now what mate, it's on the UFC YouTube channel. Anyone that hasn't seen this and you want to appreciate how good women are, you watch these two fight. They kick the shit out of each other for 5 rounds, and Weili Zhang beats it on a decision. Now Joanna has one of the worst hematomas I've ever seen. Her head looked like an alien. Okay, if you actually put
I've
on
seen
there,
this. Yep.
Joanna hematoma, mate, it's like she has an alien forehead that was created, I think, it might have been the first or second round, and Zhang is just smashing it throughout, and Joanna just keeps fighting. Like her face, they've got there you go. She has a before and after face. You can see it in the top right corner there.
Right there.
Now her nickname, right, was a punch in the face. So her first name Joanna, but you pronounce it Joanna. Joanna punch in the face. She was on the Ultimate Fighter coaching series, and mate, she is a fucking animal. She is like, you hear her talk, and she's like a borderline psychopath. Like, she is such a hard person. And watching her versus Zhang really got my respect that night. They both did, but so for Rose to knock her out so emphatically and so quickly was massively impressive. And I was actually, well, I don't know how surprised I was. Dana suggested that there's going to be a rematch. That will be the immediate thing. And I don't know whether that's because of Chinese buys and like the influence behind that. But Zhang went out a lot. I don't think anyone really predicted it. I thought she was going to give I thought it was going to be a really close fight.
It is so. I guess what I see whenever I watch these last few fights, I'm really excited to see one of these fights. The women's fights are really, for me, they're really fun to watch. And usually there is a lot of action, even in the short fights that I've seen. I wonder though and I think I mentioned this before, if the lower volume and talent, you know, the talent pool being so much smaller, you're going to see those wide variances and those shorter fights, because you're not going to have as many of sort of that high caliber, sort of Amanda Nunes type challenger. You know, there seems to be a massive gulf in, let's say, the ones that are ranked
top
fourth
three,
yeah.
outside the top. Yeah, exactly. The top three, well, maybe top three in the 145s a bit. Really, I've only seen Amanda in 145. Cyborg, who she beat, who Cyborg was supposed to be the greatest woman fighter of all time, and she knocked her out. Cyborg then left the UFC. So those two could have fought, and Cyborg could have easily beaten Nunes on the feet. She was so good. Outside of that, I've not seen anyone even remotely close in the 145. In the 135, when Shevchenko fought it, mate, as a skill set, you could argue in some areas Shevchenko could be better. I think there's a fair argument to be had. But those two, I would watch week in and week out, and I think you'd have a competitive fight year round. Rose, Joanna, Weili Zhang, they are like the highest caliber. That's when you talk about. But when I first started watching Joanna, they were saying actually, as far as a technician of Muay Thai in UFC, she might be one of the best technicians out of men and women. If you watch anyone, watch Joanna because of the way in which technically she fights as a stand. Now, I think she's amazing, but I can't quite decipher from the real, like the top level stand-up fighters. And I'd have to say, you've got to put Rose in the mix. So you're right. These fights that we're watching, they're super entertaining and they're fantastic. I just wish and it will inevitably, the depth is going to come through time. You know, the lady's going to be training at a younger age. They're going to get better. But it does drop off, I think, outside the top three, top four.
Do you think with the way that fight, that what was it? It was a kick,
left high kick.
Yeah. Is it possible that the next fight, if there was a rematch, it's much more competitive in that, Weili was just caught. It just happened. Yeah. She just got caught, and that fight would have been closer had she just missed.
100%. Yeah. That's the great thing. It's like in a way you watch a football match, and as soon as someone scores a goal, it's over. And you're like, well, they're the best team. You're like, well, they won that night. So we did. I'll stand by this. We didn't actually see enough to see who's the best fighter. She won on the night, but I don't think you can say hands down Rose is going to beat her 9 times out of 10. Weili Zhang is a handful. She is a rocket. So she's short and compact and strong. Rose is very slight but very tall and rangy. So both their movement of both of them is exceptional. So I would really love to see a longer fight, and I would be shocked to see a quick finish like that again. You never know, but
it made me think about the Nunes, I think it was Andrade fight. That was the last one. Was that the last? Wasn't it Jessica Andrade that Nunes dismantled?
I'm trying to think of a. No, it was Megan Anderson, wasn't it?
And I think there's a big difference between the fight we saw last night and that fight. Because that fight, it was just an absolute, mauling. Whereas this, when you see that one kick finish, it's a completely different feel the way that finishes, but it's such a spectacle too.
Mate, can I just add as well, when that happened, because they're in America. Rose, by the way, so I have got such a sweet spot for her. I love her to bits because she, I don't know if you saw it in a countdown, but she said something about, she made a comment just saying, oh, she's like me, or that's like me. They hate things beautiful. She was in the Ultimate Fighter series. And if you have a look at her with hair, she and with makeup on, she is absolutely stunning. And then she just shaved it off. And she was like, no makeup. No. She's like, I don't do that shit. I'm just here to fight, train. I'm a professional. And I actually think Joe Rogan's got a crush on her. You watch Joe Rogan with Rose Namajunas, and the way he talks about her, I think he really does. He's got a sweet spot for her. And then he went in the ring and interviewed her last night and was crying. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
So in the post-fight, Rose is crying and Joe Rogan's crying. And he actually said, I don't know what you've done. You're making me cry here. But the thing I wanted to add, so you've got like Rose, the American, versus Zhang, the champion from China, fighting in America. The American beats Zhang. The crowd, I'm so pleased to support the UFC and for them to be the first sport to go back to full capacity.
Yeah,
they were not fucking around. They went all in, and it was just so amazing to like hear the crowd response to a knockout finish to win the title, and hearing her chant her name. It was just, I don't know. I got chills from watching it. It was amazing.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. I think for me, the women, just pound for pound, the value in these fights is incredible. And I'm the one thing I really like about with UFC is they make sure that they are, equally advertised. This is, and I think from
Oh
a
yeah,
spectacle point of view, they're a forward thinking organization in that regard. It's very much the women are necessary for part of that whole package, and it adds so much value.
and mate, they deserve it. Like those, I genuinely, those women like Shevchenko, she scares me. Like I would not mess. I've got so much weight on her, but I would not go near her. She is a scary individual, and thank God she's that small. Those women deserve all the praise and the kind of media that they get. They are legit.
Well, let's move on. We're gonna, I think, let's go on to. There was one thing I wanted to bring up just to get your take on it, very quickly. Oh, yeah. So I wanted to talk about. I don't know if you saw this, but let me find it here. Here we are. Yeah. So Logan Paul and Floyd Mayweather may be back on. What do you think about that?
I couldn't give a shit.
Me too. I could really give a fuck. It's a waste of our time. Let's not talk about it. You ready to go on to the next thing?
Let's move on.
All right, easy enough. Let's talk about the European Super League, because that is actually an interesting topic.
Very.
So, it was something I've been paying attention to because it's an interesting story of these top European clubs looking to break away and really just create a separate league. Sort of, it's almost I don't know if their intention was to leave the Champions League, but it was to create a permanent Champions League that goes on. I think it was Wednesday nights they were advocating. And you shared with me, it was Gary Neville, I think, was the most emphatic about his views on it. I can't share the whole thing, but I found the one most interesting part that I will share. I'm sure Sky will copyright claim this and we won't be able to air it, but I'm just going to play this bit here. And let me, balls. I don't think I shared the volume, did I? 1 second. It's been a while since we shared video. I'm a bit rusty.
That's fine. No, his rant was outstanding. Like I'm trying to remember what the game was now on that last Sunday when this kind of news broke as the game was playing, and then he went on a bit of a rant about it. And I love a Gary Neville rant, I've got to say.
Yeah, so this was the bit where he was really just sort of taking it home, and this was when he was talking about what he thinks should happen.
To stamp on this it's criminal. It's a criminal act against football fans in this country. Make no mistake about it. This is the biggest sport in the world. This is the biggest sport in this country, and it's a criminal act against the fans. Simple as that. Deduct points, deduct their money, and punish them.
Do you think they?
So that was Gary Neville, and I saw this, and I saw not too long after that, I saw a Chinese football fan being interviewed about how he was really excited about the Super League, just to add some sort of context to it. I'm not sharing my opinion. This is just me sharing what I saw. And this Chinese fan was a fan of European football, and he was excited about the prospect of seeing these teams play week in and week out, which is another point of view. I'm curious what you think. I kind of know what you think, but I want to hear you sort of contextualize your thoughts on this.
So I don't have the level of understanding of what goes into this type of thing that Gary does. And he was bringing up points as like, oh, okay, I wasn't kind of fully aware of some of the points that he made out. Like initially, like, oh, this is interesting. Like, where does this lead? And then you're thinking, oh, it might actually mean leaving the Champions League and leaving the Premier League. And then you've got these fixed teams doing that. And they're all just playing each other. There's no relegation. There's no tournament. It's kind of like I thought quite early on, oh god. And I'm a Man United supporter, so my team was in the mix with this.
Yeah,
and quite early on, mate, I just was not interested and really hoped that was not the case. And then hearing the Premier League stance on it, or the FA stance on it, saying the Premier League are going to vote on it, they could be kicked out. I was like, Jesus Christ! Like I'm gonna have to support another team. I don't think I can back this. I fundamentally just didn't want to stand for it. Like I heard an interview in more depth where they were suggesting that basically these rich owners from abroad that haven't been brought up with football over here want certainty. So they want to be able to create something where they have a certain amount of revenue, whether they win, lose, or draw, or whatever. Whilst what's happening in the Champions League, there is shitloads of money if you're successful, but like Liverpool at the moment, who won the league last year and looked phenomenal, are really struggling for a number of reasons this year. They may not get into the Champions League this year, and that's going to cost them. So they're trying to create more certainty with breaking off. And actually, I just don't believe it's in the spirit of sport. Like, you know, to get shitloads of money for something guaranteed, you're not going to have the same passion behind it. With this Chinese fan who was looking forward to the best of Europe, mate, don't worry about it. You already got that with the Champions League. That's the cream of the crop. They've earned to be there, and it's a knockout tournament. The best stay in. It's, in my opinion, that it is the greatest form of football in the entire world. The World Cup doesn't even come close to it, because these guys are paid thousands and thousands of pounds, millions of pounds, training every single day, and you have a coach with them all the time. Internationals can't compete with that because they only get floated in every couple of months. You can't create a team and have a fully connected team like you can with a whole league season. So for that reason, the Champions League for me is the ultimate football competition. And when you watch a game like, I don't know if you saw it, the first leg of PSG versus Bayern Munich, I mean, it was two of the best teams in Europe going at each other, you know, going for the throat, amazing football. They were like, I think Bayern had 30 shots on goal. It was unbelievable. It was so exhilarating. And that is what had made me fall in love with football. So I am very glad that it all fell through, and I'm really happy with the Premier League and Champions League as it is. Yeah,
I coming from America, so as an American, I'm going to push back a little bit, because I don't think that having a league where there's no relegation means you're going to have a product that people are less passionate about. And if you look at NFL, MLB, American sports, people are you know, almost religious about their teams. And I would say that, let's say, coming from Philadelphia, which is quite a you know, zealous sporting city, where they're supporting teams that aren't being relegated, I don't think that's necessarily it or the issue. But I will say that it is problematic from a competition standpoint, because the first thing that I think you have to have a problem with is that these teams are going somewhere where they're guaranteed more money in a competition. You know, they're more money in a competition where business is sort of paramount. How well your business is run is how well you're going to put a product on the field, to the most degree. And that's not fair to other teams in the Premier League that won't have this option, because it's sort of ring fenced off from these teams. And the other contradiction about this whole thing, the teams that have been invited in, you know, the whole idea is we want to see the best of the best. And like you said, and I think even Gary Neville said, Arsenal, Man United, they're not in the Champions League. It's like, we're not even. And, you know, what has Tottenham really won recently to earn, you know,
the way they're playing?
Yeah. So it really, what they've invited is they've invited the teams that have the most resource to spend money on the top players.
Correct.
And they wanted to create this, and this is where the Premier League has a bit of a problem, or fans of the Premier League have a bit of a problem, because this league, above any other league in the world, supports businesses operating as independent entities within this sort of Premier League structure. And I don't agree with it, and I think it was the wrong thing to do. I think it was stupid. But at the same time, we can't be surprised that businessmen are trying to make decisions to better their investment. And that's what this is at the end of the day. It's businessmen looking at these, you know, for all the fans' love of Man City and their owners coming in and just putting money into this product to make a better return. It's not that dissimilar in many ways to trying to create a super league. But it is. Yeah, go right ahead.
I was going to say, so this is where I really take on Gary Neville's perspective, because he's a Man United fan, and everyone knows that. He's a red through and through. So if anyone, you'd think that he might be biased towards that. His club are involved with that, and he's saying hammer them, fine them, drop points, relegate them, do whatever, throw the book at them. So, and I love that. He understands. He's also a club owner, so he owns a stake in Salford Football Club. So he understands. He's been a player, like a career player from youth all the way through, captain, play for England. He's there now, a chairman. He understands the kind of the whole tier of it. And watching him talk, like what Gary's done, I think it was maybe the start of last season. He was saying how he thinks it's disgusting the way the Premier League isolate the lower leagues, and there should be more of a threshold for payment. So rather than the massive payments for the top five, there should be a bit less, because they earn more money in the other tournaments anyway. And it should be more evenly distributed to the lower teams to help them out to grow the game. So he's someone that sees it from a perspective of, like, I'm a businessman in Salford, but I'm also trying to do it for the game. And like, we need to really listen to people like that. So he's looking at it from a really balanced perspective. I do take your point. I can't disagree from it from a business perspective, but we need to hold on to it. And I'm really glad with the reaction and the way within a matter of days with the outroar, they did a U-turn on it, and I think it's the right call. Ultimately, I think it's where sports is at its best. I would agree with you that the Six Nations and also the Autumn Internationals, rugby union in general, as well as cricket, would argue, hang on a minute here, there's only like 6 teams that are really competitive. The rest aren't worth, you could argue there's a lot less competition lower down the list, but you've got the Southern Hemisphere. There's only like 4 teams in it, I think. You got, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and there's a new one. Is it Fiji that have gone in? Oh, Argentina have just been brought into it, and they play every year. So there's only 4 teams. There's no relegation, but that's about as competitive as you can get. So I think there are examples out there. I think that's very fair to say, but I think we have to acknowledge the point that you made as well, that if they're getting guaranteed payment, are they going to have the level of desire that a club that's going to be relegated and lose millions will against defend in the last few games of the season? That passion, it's not going to be there to the same extent. Is it going to be competitive? Absolutely. But I don't believe when you've got relegation on the line and going through to a Champions League spot, like that key stage is, I don't think you can quite compete on that level. And that's where the English Football League has an advantage over a lot of other sports.
I don't agree. So I don't agree with I'm glad. I am in full agreement with you on the Super League. I think it was this biggest contradiction. And I think my point was more, I look at the Premier League from somebody who's come at it in the last 15 years. And there's certain decisions that people are making where you're trying to parse this whole pure pyramid system. But then you also have this other side of it that I see, which is this massive business that charges a shit ton of money for a product, a massive product. And for me, I'm not surprised that this, was attempted. This isn't like a big,
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, of course they're doing this. You're giving them freedom to work as a business, which from an American standpoint, we have teams that are owned, but they're somewhat more regulated because they're part of a franchise. They're a franchise in part of a bigger group. And what I will push back on is, when you, again, looking at American sports, and I've been a fan of Aston Villa and the Philadelphia Eagles, and I don't see a difference in how much it means to the players and how much it means to the fans. So I don't think that's the case. But I think the way this product was packaged would be kind of a limp dick product, because they would be just in this competition on Wednesdays, and they would be, yeah, of course they want to win this, but they're also Champions League. They wanted to have everything. And it was just going to be a big, just sort of sloppy mess of rich people football. And it wasn't going to be that interesting, really. So I don't even think the product was going to be that great. And the Premier League is protecting its investment by saying, fine, you go do that and you're out of this. And I think a lot of fans would have, it's a weird one because clubs like Manchester United would have survived. Let's say this goes ahead and these clubs just leave the Premier League and they start their own product. They're probably going to be fine, but it's going to be such a shitty product. I'd be curious to see what would have happened in the Premier League if that happened. I don't know that it would have been allowed to, but they have such an international following. There's a lot of people like myself who I'm new to pyramid football, relatively speaking, in the last 15 years. There's a lot of people in America and in Asia and in Australia that don't probably understand, why this is such a bad thing, because, the Premier League has always been a worldwide business and they don't see it in the same way. They don't understand the relegation and promotion aspect. And I see that, and I see the value in that, but that's very specific to this sort of, structure, this football league structure in Europe specifically and in England.
Yeah, it is. And I know still, I can push back. I'm not suggesting that the need to win in American football isn't that, like, I know they're going to be super competitive, but the thing is, if they lose, they lose, and they have to live with that, which is difficult enough. I appreciate, and that's enough to force anyone to fight. But once you lose and you'll get relegated to another league, and then you're going to lose sponsorships, you lose millions of pounds of opportunity. You're playing against an inferior competition for an entire year, which is the championship is such a tough league. You know, you've got to battle and scrap every single week to try and get your ass back in again. It is not the same. It's the same as saying, oh, you know, well, you can lose, you know, a football match versus getting in a fight. There's a it isn't just a loss. You have your manhood taken away from you. And as a team, there is something, I wouldn't say you lose your manhood, but there's a devastation, not just financial, yes, but not just that. It's like psychologically, you've got to work for an entire year to get back to this again. To hopefully, because you may be in here like a lot of teams have never got back. You know, like Nottingham Forest, a massive club, has not been back in the Premier League. Like the impact is massive. So yeah, and then you lose players like. You know, Jack Grealish could have got like your captain, you know, your main superstars, they leave. It's just, so I think I still stand by my point. I'm not, I think that my point could come across as I'm putting down sports like rugby or American football. I'm not meaning to, but I think that when you have a loss, something that you're relegated, that level is unique. And I think it does inspire a different level of anticipation and excitement, nervousness. There's a different form of excitement when it comes to the end of the season. You've got the top of the table clash, the European spots, and then you've got the relegation, and it's frenetic. And you then have the opposite side where you get clubs coming up, so they get the feeling you've got these clubs that in the Championship have. Like they've their day at Wembley. They get to go in the Wembley Stadium, score a goal to get taken up to the Premier League, and they win it's like you win in the lottery. Although it's that kind of very humble grassroots kind of feel, and that goes all the way down a division. So I do stand by. I think it's so unique, and I absolutely love that. That's what I kind of love about football.
I like that too, and that's where I think what I'm debating is the better thing, because not everything is better in English football, in my view. And this is somebody who loves English football. So in English football, you have a lot of games for a lot of teams in the middle of the table who aren't going to get promoted and aren't going to get relegated. And they're not in cup games, and they're just playing for points and pride. And, there's not a lot in it for some of the games. You know, when you start getting into sort of March, April, May, you watch it because you want to see your team win. You love football. I still love watching Villa games, but they're not as meaningful because the gulf in talent in the Premier League is so massive. And I think the suggestion Gary Neville made is incredible. I love the idea of being able to resource these lower level teams to be more competitive. Because when you get Man City versus Sheffield United, it's like, okay, we know City's going to win. It's kind of a foregone conclusion. It's one of my problems with F1. I want to like F1 that much more. I wish F1 was more structured like Indy cars, where everybody was, had the same stock equipment that engineers had to make work. It was a bit of a MacGyver job. But you always have Lewis Hamilton and the best car winning. And it's like, you get more excited when there's competition. And I think sometimes the Premier League suffers from the fact that business is a bit too king in the league. And in the NFL, you have games that are more meaningful longer into the season and much more competitive. It's a bit less of a surprise when you have a shittier team beating a top team. And in the Premier League, it's like, wow, that was totally unexpected. And it's
you think so? So you think it's... you see, I wouldn't have thought that. I know I'll speak from football, English football terms, and the Premier League is touted for this. So if you look in Germany, France, and Spain, Italy as well, the standard of the lower leagues, the lower people in their top league, is nowhere near the standard of a gritty Premier League team. Like you're going to get a battle. So if you're Liverpool, Man United, Man City, every away game. Like the game today, Man United against Ellen Road. Thank God there are no fans in the stadium, because that would have been horrendous. That they hate each other. They would have been on United players' back. To try and go there and get result is a absolute nightmare. And I think generally speaking, you've got your Man City's on form at the moment. You can't see losing any. Man United are on a good run, but really any team can beat anyone. And I don't know how that compares to American football, because I'm not as much of a follower. But what I would support you on, mate, is I love the grandstand finish to American sports, the playoffs. I think actually, especially now when Man City have kind of won, it's lost a bit of momentum for the title, right? It's now okay, it's more exciting to see who gets maybe European football, who doesn't get relegated. And I support you. I think to make the Premier League even better, you should have the top 4 or top 8, and then they go into that playoff thing that, you know, going against each other. Man City are the favourites. They've looked outstanding, but will they do it across 3 legs or 5 legs or whatever?
Yeah.
And that to me is like the best of both worlds then.
I agree. And that may be the differentiator, because I'm not, the way I'm painting it is I don't think the product is boring for the Premier League. I just think when you look at, you know, when Villa were sort of not getting relegated, not getting promoted, there was a point where I was just watching games to watch games. They weren't in a cup. They weren't going to get relegated. They weren't going to compete for Champions League. And there's a part of me that's like, I could go out and play a round of golf. I'll watch, but if somebody wants to go out and play golf, I'll probably do that. Whereas with an Eagles game, no, I'm not golfing today. The Eagles are on. That's something important may happen here. Now, Villa win a game that they're, so right now Villa are probably in that space now where they're losing enough games where they're not going to get relegated.
You're saying
they're not going to,
but you're not pushing enough to be in.
So right now, if you ask me to go golfing tonight when Villa are playing, or is it this afternoon when Villa are playing? See, I've golfed today. I don't even know when Villa are playing. And Villa fans are going to watch this and say, you're not a real fan. Fair enough. Fine. I'm not a real fan. I support your team. I pay money to go to the games. I, you know, watch all the results, and you know, I'm a fan as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But if I compare it to, let's say, my time watching the Eagles, I have to watch that game because it's more times than not more meaningful than the Villa game. And I don't mind watching the replay.
I understand your point there, mate.
And that's for me the bit that I think, you know, what you said about having maybe more of an American style, you know, playoff structure. I think that's in America, you have, like, that's everything. You know, you don't have all these little cups on the side. So you have all these little consolation prizes. So not that it is that way, but that's what it looks like to an American. The FA Cup, okay, for a team like Villa, that's a consolation prize because they're not going to be able to compete in the Premier League title. They're not going to be able to get into the European, you know, they're not going to be relegated. And there's interest at the bottom of the table, you know, when you don't get relegated. And I've been in that. That was an exciting year when Villa didn't get relegated. As much as I hated it, it was fun.
Yeah,
it was
exactly. Every game is so important, right? Every point
that getting promoted was incredible. So there's so much value, and the games can be way more meaning than that of American sport. But when you have that, like, one meaningful Super Bowl competition, that means everything to these players, and these players may never get a chance to win a Super Bowl. Getting into that game, it's like that's where those differences are. And I think that your suggestion might be a good way to maybe bridge that gap a little bit.
Yeah, I you know, it's never going to happen, but I would back that. I would love to see that. Even if United were like undefeated, 20 points in the lead, and then they got to go into a tournament. It's not always the case. The best team is going to go on, like we saw in the NFL last year, like you said, you know, because I'm undefeated in my picks in the NFL. I don't know if you remember.
You are, yeah.
But I backed the Buccaneers, and you know, they were not the favorites going into it, and yet they won. So I kind of like that. You get who's the best man on that day, kind of showing up, and it's very similar to the fight game as well, right? Like it's not necessarily the best fighter wins; it's just the best fighter on the night, like in that moment.
Leicester City, that year they won the Premier League, was one of the most exciting seasons I can ever remember.
That was unbelievable.
Or City winning against United in the. So apologies for bringing that up, but winning, you know, I mean, that was. I don't care if you're a United fan. That was unbelievable.
No, you can't deny that. You can't deny the fact that for them, for the first league that they won that, and you know the way in which it was done, and the like it was, it was you know, it must have been unbelievable for the fans.
That to me, I think that is probably, and I say this about American sport, you know, preaching its virtues as a sport, which is not perfect. The NFL is far from perfect, but that finish to a Premier League season was probably one of the greatest finishes to a league season in any sport that I can think of. I can't think of a season ending in that way, last minute goal scored to win the title. It was incredible.
What? If the timing's right and it's done like that, it's spectacular. I think the thing that you can say in defense of the Premier League kind of setup is that, unlike in the American sports, we know who the best team of the league is. You cannot fluke a Premier League. There's no got lucky shot, you know, oh, Weili Zhang, I got knocked out. She, you know, got lucky, something, you know, happened. There's just no excuse for it. Like the best team, that you cannot fluke 38 games. So at least we know who the best team is in that league for that year. That is that. So, you know, they deserve that. And to win the Premier League is maybe less exciting, but it's one of the most sought after prizes in football, because you know that you've had to grind it out for 38 games. So I suppose that's maybe the caveat to it. From a purist sport perspective, we know who the best is, but then it doesn't compete with the excitement like we see on the Champions League nights, where, you know, it's the best over 2 legs, which are probably the best team, but it doesn't always work like that. You get an early goal, you win 1-0, and then you cling on for a 0-0 second leg and you're through. But, you know, it's the excitement in those games, similar to like the American playoffs, is just like through the roof.
Yeah, but and I think the Champions League is the closest thing you're going to get to, in some degree, to the NFL, because if you lose, or if you don't make Champions League football, like for United, it sucks, but it's not devastating.
Shit. It is shit, mate. Because the Europa, is a fucking joke. Like it is a joke. Like, how can you be knocked out of a tournament and be put into another tournament and have any credibility whatsoever? So the fact that we're saying, oh, we're going on to win the UEFA, it's still a credible cup. It's not a fucking credible cup, because we got knocked out to get into it. So it doesn't mean shit. It's the teams that are 5th and 6th and 7th going in there. That speaks volumes itself. And you get in there if you get knocked out of the Champions League. It's the kind of, you know, it's the plate, it's the backup, it's the, you know, it's not a. Now look, for those mid-tier teams, maybe like Villa in this situation that you've explained, mid-tier, you've got something to go into and fight for. Yeah, okay, but let's not just stand around and say this, you know, it's an unbelievable achievement, because it isn't. Like, so. Yes.
Is that a British view, though? Because I don't think the rest of
Europe. It's a huge view.
Europe.
I don't know if anyone else agrees with me.
The United fan view too, because I don't think I don't like the fact that Champions League losers go into Europa League. I don't like that.
No,
and the one thing that they did start doing, which I think is really good, is the fact that you can qualify for the Champions League through the Europa League. I think that's 100% correct. And
now that I can understand.
Yeah,
that I think, you know, you've earned your spot. It's like a promotion from a tournament. I support.
Yeah,
but to get knocked out of one to go into the other, does, like, what shame me another sport that does that. You can't have any credibility in it. No, mate, this is. I think it's my view. I don't know, other people and footballers would say how great the Europa League is, but I do not.
But I think that's a top 5 fan view as well. Because I think if you look at an Everton, they're not going to thumb their nose at. The only reason people,
that's fair.
People below the top 5 fans, or fans from the top 5 teams, don't like Europa League, is how stupid the Premier League is with scheduling around Europa League's fixtures. They don't give a shit about seeing Premier League teams do well in Europe, and they'll schedule, like, if you have a match on Saturday and you got a Thursday,
it's a joke.
They just don't care. It's just, we're not going to change the schedule.
Something's got to give.
I always wondered if the Champions League could be expanded, so that instead of having because what makes it a bit weird is you have 2 different competitions, and the teams that are in the Europa League are not bad teams, even before the knockouts.
They're not
the Champions League.
Bad teams. No, they're not bad. They're just not the best.
But I wonder if it would be worthwhile to even expand the Champions League and make that Europa League redundant, have a much larger European competition where more teams have a chance to compete in those round robin.
I would only change the fact that if you get knocked out of the Champions League, you don't go into Europa. I think you're out of the Champions League. That's it. And those people that qualified, rightfully so, that are mid-tier. Look, you can go from the Championship. Usually, the people that get going from the Championship to the Premier League, their goal is survival. That's that. They just want to stay in the Premier League. Now, imagine if one of those can get into Europa and play an AC Milan, still a club with great history, playing in the San Siro stadium. I think it's unbelievable for those teams. Yes, I am speaking biasly from a top tier team, and I'm looking at the pinnacle, the best, which is the Champions League. And if we get knocked out of that, which we did, and we deserve to be knocked out, we do not deserve to be pushed into another tournament, like at someone else's expense. I think that you're out of that tournament and that's it. I wouldn't change anything else. I think having another cup for they're not middle tier teams, are they? They're the outside the top 4. They're 5th, 6th, 7th teams. That it's a reputable tournament. It's just let's not kid ourselves and put it anywhere. It is a distinct level down, and maybe even a couple of levels down from Champions League. And for any clubs outside of the top 4, that's worth fighting for sure. But I don't think I would change anything else. Just the support of the Premier League with the fixtures and making sure it's a Sunday only game, which they have done for United since, to be fair. So you've got those 3 days rest.
The Europa League may be a bigger deal than I think it is. The more I think about it, the more I would really like to see just top 6 teams into a European, mega tournament. The more I think about it, the more I love that idea. Now, that's not knowing. I'm not. To anybody who's going to give me shit about this, I don't know enough about the Europa League to know whether this is like, the FA Cup, something that will always have to be there, and there's a reason for that for other countries. I like the idea of seeing a top 6 in every league just competing in a tournament. That's sort of bringing together the best of what we talked about with American sports with European football and seeing these stadiums. I wouldn't
disagree with that. I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be against that either. Again,
it's just two competitions. Sorry, Hugo.
No, because I don't watch Europa, and I'm with United. It's kind of like a reluctant watch sometimes, and you know that they're tired, and it impacts the game on the weekend, and they're rested in the first few games. You don't rest for Champions League; they get their best players in there. Europa teams sometimes they rest to start with, so it's like that kind of speaks volumes. So either eradicate the whole, if they eradicate the whole thing, it would make no difference to me at all. And if they extended the Champions League to do that, I wouldn't feel that anything less of the Champions League. It's just now you've got some more teams to contend with. The difference between finishing 4th and 5th in a Premier League does not equal great to shit in any means. So you're still going to have your work cut out. I just love the tournament basis, and I just not a fan of a second tier tournament. The truth is I can't get excited about it. Is how because the Champions League is there. How can I?
Yeah, and that for me is why I think to have top 6 in every league competing, in sort of a European competition, I love that, because 6th place is attainable for those teams that are middle of the road who aren't going to win a title, but may be good enough to compete. Maybe good enough to pull Leicester in the Champions League, or at least have their day out. Earn that 6th place makes the rest of the Premier League competition interesting, and I'm sure the same for Italy and Spain. But I think the other issue with Europa League is it is kind of a booby prize for those teams that are used to competing in the Premier League. And it has to be looked at as a consolation prize, because it is the second best, or the second tier of these teams that aren't able to play in the Champions League. And I think that really devalues the competition.
Now, the one thing I don't know here, what the eligibility is across Europe. I know where it stands in Britain, but I don't know where it stands in the rest of Europe. But what I do know is that it's not the top 4 teams in all leagues at all. Actually, Britain, unsurprisingly so, has I think the highest allocation because our league is so difficult to win. And I think that just sums it up actually. But if you have a look, let's say across Turkey, it's not the top 4 teams in Turkey that are going into it. And there's no disrespect to Turkey, I'm just plucking out of the air. They're not renowned to be one of the top European leagues. It's the same as Sweden. You don't have the top 4 teams in Sweden in the Champions League, because the 4th team, there's such a gulf between them and United's, Barcelona's, that there's a different tiering system. So I believe that if you win in a smaller league, which I'm not going to name anymore, I think you have to go into the qualifying process. Before you get into the group stage. So if you win top 4, you go automatically into group stage in the British league. In other leagues, you may win that league, and I'm sure you don't walk into the Champions League. I think you may still have to qualify based on how reputable that league is. So that, I believe, will be, and this is a total assumption, Sean, but this is where I think the Europa comes in. Where it has more of a standing, so that they have the opportunity to play in Europe, and it covers that. It closes the gap actually between winning a league, being dominant in your national league, versus going against the cream of the crop in Europe. So there's still an opportunity, but you've got to earn your way in, and this Europa is a way that they can kind of just bridge that gap somehow. So. Maybe there is a space for it that we're just. I know that I am really overlooking because of where my team is, and just looking at the Man United vision rather than these other countries.
Yeah, I look at it from somebody who supports the Villa here, and somebody who's an American who's come over here, and it's is I kind of want more people to either embrace the Europa League or it to just not. It's one of the two. I'd rather people are all in or not. And it's this weird in between space of we kind of like it, we kind of don't. I don't know. It's hard for me to get into, and I would be really happy to see Villa make European football. That's something that Villa haven't done since I first started following Villa. But even then, like I kind of don't want to watch Villa in Europe if, let's say, we're sitting people so that we can be competitive in the Premier League because we only have 2 days rest. It's just so counterintuitive to competition.
I agree.
Well, interesting week this week. We have what do we have coming up anyway the next week? We got some fights there that we're looking at.
On the fight front, yeah. Next week, the main card will be quite interesting. I say the main card, the main event. We've got Dominic Reyes versus, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I think it's Yuri Prochaska. And is he from Poland? This guy he's a character. He's that class, which some people say, so he's a twat. No, he's a character in space of just watch his fights. This Yuri guy, he's something like 6'5", 6'6". He's absolutely stacked. He studies philosophy. I think he's obsessed with philosophy. Very intelligent bloke and very quirky. Looked like this physical powerhouse, very intellectual, but very odd, quirky style, but very powerful and explosive. And Reyes is like he lost to Blachowicz, but in my opinion, I believe he beat John Jones a couple of fights ago. So that should be a stand-up war. But if we're looking a bit further afield from that, the week after that is, so we're looking in 2 weeks' time, May the 9th, we have the return of TJ Dillashaw, who got done for UPO. He was the champion of the bantamweight division. He went down a weight class to fight Henry Cejudo, the champion there. He got knocked out, and after the fight, it came out that he took EPO and got banned for 2 years. So this is his first fight back. Corey Sandhagen is an all-round beast. Like he can grapple with the best of them, and he's very accomplished on his feet as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how the ex-champ is going to do with coming back and having 2 years off. But TJ, just so you know, as far as someone's movement on their feet, he's so elusive as a kickboxer. Sean, he's unbelievable. He's a bit like Michael Jordan in that he's renowned to be one of the most competitive people there, and there's footage of him like punching people after the bell in training, like stuff like that, just to kind of make a point. Like he's really aggressive guy. When you hear him interview, he's a very intelligent, articulate, seems a lovely bloke, but he's supposed to be a real competitive monster. So yeah, that in 2 weeks' time is going to be well worth a watch. And then I think it's after that, we've got 262, which is May 16th. Yeah. Charles Oliveira versus Chandler, Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz, Tony Ferguson versus Beneil Dariush. I'm going to have to do some more research on him. I don't know enough about him. So yeah, some great fights coming up over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, and we'll I think we'll have definitely a companion show for that ahead of the fight. So if that's on the 16th, so yeah, we'll be doing it the Sunday prior to the 16th, which will probably be something like the 10th of May. So everybody, yeah, tune into that. If you are sticking around this long to watch us, then if you're not subscribing to us, you are an embarrassment as a fan of ours. And you need to subscribe to the channel and please comment and tell me why I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about and what, why Hugh can't seem to pick a fight right. Let's just hear all these opinions. So I'm going to start putting bets on my fights here. I'm curious to see how long my streak goes. If I hit 1 million, then we need to maybe change the focus of this channel and maybe somehow brand in my picks. We need to sell.
I think
that.
We should be doing that for sure, mate. I think we should put some money on the next set of fights. So how about that then? In a couple of weeks, we can let you do some research. Maybe give a couple of weeks for the Dillashaw, either the Dillashaw fight against Sandhagen, or we can go in the UFC 262 because there are 3 big fights there we could put money on.
I put money on all 3, and we see who makes the most money.
Yeah. I'll be
because then we can decide how much we want to risk if we want to pick if it's a decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we got it's not just like not just making the pick. It's just like how you're going to go about making money. Who can maximize the money?
Yeah. Because what you could do is you could then we definitely have to pick who's going to win. But are you going to spend half of your money on the winner, and then the other
okay.
half. Or I don't know. There's something maybe we need to stew on that for a bit, but definitely I think we need to start getting some bets in as far as UFC fights and see how we get on. But anyway, thank you to everybody.
Yeah. So are you saying like me and you should bet against each other, or are you saying that we should go to the bookies and have bankroll management in there?
Ooh, we could bet against each other. The thing is, I kind of like the idea of the bankroll
agree with a lot of them,
we
don't we?
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've.
If we don't agree, that's where we have to start looking at putting money against me.
I think when we start making picks, then we start putting money where our mouth is.
That's cherry on the top type of stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
We'll have a bankroll management one for for the ongoing fights. See who can bring the most up.
Well, to everybody who's watched, thank you for tuning in. Hugh had a lovely time as always, and look forward. We are live on Sundays again now consistently, so please join us next week. Usually about 2 to 3 o'clock UK time, depending on when my tea time is in the morning. And thanks for everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch up with you soon. Take care.
See you guys.